Hello, sports card collectors and investors. Thank you for joining me again for another video. Today I'm going to be going a little bit off topic. I've been getting some requests from sports card collectors and investors asking about some comic book investing type questions. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to compare some of the high-end comic book sales versus some of the high-end sports card sales. And so I'm going to have a series of videos coming out. This is the first one. And so I wanted to pick a couple of very popular comic book, sports card figure, arguably the most popular one, as well as a very popular comic book figure. Make a comparison between kind of these high-end sales and get your thoughts on it. I started out back in the late 80s, early 90s. I was definitely collecting sports cards a lot. I also got into comic books in the early 90s, and it was mostly Image. I don't know, for those people that cross over and do both, Todd McFarlane broke off from Marvel and created Image Comics with a few other guys. Rob Liefeld was the creator of Deadpool, and he was also at Marvel. So all these Marvel guys, they just got tired of everyone calling the shots at Marvel, and so they decided, hey, we're going to start our own comic book production company, and it's going to be called Image Comics. And they came out with Spawn and Youngblood. Spawn is one of the highest selling comic books of all time, but there's a parallel between comic book investing as well as sports card investing in the early 90s, and that's that they were massively produced. Way massively produced as collector's items in a similar fashion to each other. So that's where the parallels lie. And the same thing happened with Marvel, with X-Men and with Spider-Man comics. Just the production runs, the print runs were so much higher than they were back, in the 60s when Stan Lee started Marvel and came out with all these amazing characters. Now with all of the Marvel movies coming out in DC and the rest of it, now you're seeing a resurgence of these people. And it's the same crowd. It's that 35 to 50-year-old age group that collected back then and is now, hey, they've got some money in their pocket and they can afford some things that they couldn't afford anymore. And now you've got another common parallel between the two industries is comic books are now graded by CGC, is the main company that grades. They're highly reputable. Whereas back in 1990, that wasn't the case. And it's similar with sports cards. So the markets for both have evolved. And so I thought it would be fun to just kind of compare one big comic against one big sports card. So let's get right into it. I'm going to go right to the top of the heap of the Michael Jordan sales as far as the highest sale goes on record that I know of anyway, and that is the 1997 Metal Universe Precious Metal Gems Green, and it sold for $350,000 on February of 2019. That is a pretty penny for any card. And this is one, it's interesting. I mean, it's on the holder, it shows that it's altered. So it could be restored or whatever. I don't know what, I'm not the grading expert, so, but it's not as if that's a PSA 10. I mean, and I did see an interview, I believe, on YouTube with the guy that bought it, and, he didn't care if it had been altered. I mean, this guy was a hardcore collector, and he just wanted that card, so bless him. But I mean, he made it happen at $350,000. I don't know if there's any more of those. That would be interesting. I didn't look at the PSA reports. If someone could comment on that, if that is the only one known to be in existence, that would be really interesting to know. Maybe there's a few of them. I'm not really sure, but to date, that's the highest Michael Jordan card sold, and probably, I'm assuming that's the highest basketball card sold as of yet. So it's interesting to kind of see, and collectibles investing, you just never know. I mean, it can go anywhere. And so I wanted to draw a comparison between that card with the rarity, with the scarcity, and the Incredible Hulk #1 that was done by Stan Lee in 1963. So, and this is back when Hulk was gray. He wasn't even green yet. I don't think he became the Green Hulk until Incredible Hulk #3 or 4. But anyway, to me, this is just, and even if you're not a comic book collector or even really into it that much, you have to respect the history behind this book. Stan Lee is an absolute legend in that world, and just kind of you have to give respect to a guy that created all these characters that now amount to billions and billions of dollars of box office money that's coming through. I mean, really, they're the movies that are making all of the money in Hollywood right now, and it's all because of one guy, Stan Lee, and then some of the DC folks. But I mean, my gosh. So I wanted to, draw a comparison. If we're looking at, that Jordan card, maybe there's a handful of those out there. Again, I'm not really certain on it. If they even know how many are out there, even if it, we also don't know how many are ungraded. I just don't know. So that's something that hopefully someone can comment on and provide some clarity. But I looked up, so I use on the comic book side, there's a few different sites that you can use. I mean, CGC is the grading company. I believe they have their own lookup tool. But I go to gocollect.com, and that's another resource that'll give you kind of recent sales and what the pricing was like, so you can have a pretty good idea of comparisons. And so for the Incredible Hulk #1, the last sale was in November of 2018. It auctioned off at $370,000, so in the same ballpark. And the way that comic books grade in the same way, up to 10, but they actually go, up to, so it's like 8.5, then 9.0, then 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8, and then 10s are not really possible. I don't think there's one vintage comic that has a perfect 10. So I know like BGS has got like pristine 10, black label. There's no Incredible Hulk #1s with a black label that are known. I mean, and who knows, maybe there's one out there, but I don't believe there's one vintage comic book. I mean, if you think about, those are typically 35, 40-page books, not one single piece of cardboard like a sports card is. I think it's probably a long shot that you ever find a 10.0. On the Go Collect site, though, there is, it looks like there have been a few graded that go up to 9.4, I think. So they're, just because they haven't been sold doesn't mean that they're not out there. So I thought that was really interesting. But this one was a 9.0, so that gives you, kind of a reference point, something to compare to. So a 9.0 CGC graded Hulk #1 went in November of 18 at $370,000. So it would be interesting, to see what those would go for, if there was a higher grade now. And even that one, comic books have kind of cooled off a little bit, especially with COVID and with movies shutting down and there not being any real, hype around Marvel movies or comic book movies. I feel like a lot of the, the comic book investing is probably a good time to buy, actually, on the comic book side, just because there's, there is, I think, opportunities there, but it is all based on, a lot of it is based on, movies and shows and things like that. But they are a piece of art. They are a piece of history. So, I mean, it's pretty darn cool, those books. So I thought that was a kind of a cool comparison. I was trying to find one that was kind of a similar, somewhat apples to apples comparison between the two markets. And then, of course, you've got, 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan rookie cards, the PSA 10. There's 312 of those out in the wild, and we just had an auction go off at $90-something thousand for one of those, which was at that time the all-time record. And now there's actually a PWCC auction. I know everyone's rolling their eyes right now, where it's sitting at $80,000 with a couple of days left. So I know that a lot of people are keeping their eyes peeled to see how that one finishes out. It's pretty interesting stuff. So thank you again to the subscribers that reached out and asked me to make this, because I think these are fun. It's something different. To be honest, I haven't seen anything on YouTube where they're making comparisons between two collectibles markets, two collectibles industries, because there are parallels between these things, between comics and sports cards that are kind of interesting, and trends. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I will be doing more of these. It's been a good time. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Have a good night.